Hi everyone, I'm going to keep this description quite brief as you can always check out how to follow the recipe in the description. So you want to grease a tin with your lard so that the mince pies don't stick once they're baked. You don't need very much, it's just enough to grease the tray, and then we'll start making the mince pies. The oven's set to about 160 and I bake for around 15 to 20 minutes, but you do need to keep an eye on it. When I ask my nan how long, she never knows. She just says keep an eye on it, so that's how I bake. You want to use half the amount of fat to however much flour you use. For my recipe, I use 12 ounces of self-raising flour and 6 ounces of fat. You can use half butter or stock and half lard, so 3 ounces of each. However, I like to use 4 ounces of lard and 2 ounces of stock, and this is because the more lard you use, the more buttery your pastry is. So if you want more biscuity pastry, use more stock or butter, or don't use lard at all. I wouldn't do it with no lard though, I think it'd be really ugh. So yeah, you just want to measure out your fat so that you've got half fat combined to however much flour you've used. And then once you've done that, you will add the fat to your flour that's been sieved, and then you're going to make breadcrumbs from it by rubbing the fat and the flour together between your fingers and your thumb. I start by using a knife because cold hands make better pastry and I don't have the coldest hands. So start by using a knife to break up the bigger chunks of fat, and then I get my hands in there. As I say, I only use the tips of my fingers, which is standard for making the breadcrumbs with pastry. There will be no pastry on the palms of my hands, which I do show at some point in this video. So it's just an act of raising that flour up and rubbing it together to get the breadcrumbs. As you can see, the palm's clear. And as you work, turn the bowl around so you're evenly getting to all the flour in the bowl and getting that breadcrumb consistency. Once you've got your breadcrumbs finished, which I'll have any second now, you want to get an egg and 2 bowls or 2 glasses or whatever, and you're just going to separate the egg white from the egg yolk. If you get a little bit of the yolk, like if your yolk splits as you're doing it and you get a little bit in the white, don't worry, it's not worth stressing about or wasting an egg over. My nan learnt to bake during rationing and she wouldn't have wasted an egg over this, and I don't waste an egg over this. So there, as you can see, that's fine. So you're going to put the white aside for a minute and then get a glass of water. You don't want to get your glass of water ready before you start because you want your glass of water to be cold, not warm or room temperature. And as your oven's on, you might find your kitchen does get warm, so things in it warm up. And then once you've got your glass of cold water, you're going to add it to your egg yolk, whisk it up, and then you're going to start adding it to your breadcrumbs by making a little hole in the middle of your breadcrumbs, and then add your little bit of liquid and then start bringing it together. Add your liquid a little bit at a time because you don't want your pastry to be so wet that you can't roll it out, but you don't want it to be so dry that it doesn't bind together either. And I couldn't tell you a measurement for how much liquid I use, as I go by touch, as that's how my nan bakes. And if you've read the description, you'll see that that's where I learnt this recipe. And I start by using a knife to bring it together because, again, I don't like to get my hands in there and warm up the pastry too much, but ultimately you are going to have to get your hands in there as it's the only proper way to bring it together and bind it. And I don't have a KitchenAid or anything else to do these things for me. And yep, so you're just bringing it all together so that it becomes to a consistency where it's rollable, which mine will be within the next few seconds. Once it's ready, you're going to grab your cutting board and your pastry cutters. You want 2 pastry cutters, one slightly bigger than the other. It's only they're next to each other. Like, so if you buy a pack of pastry cutters, these 2 sizes are next to each other. The bigger of the 2 sizes should be able to sit atop of each of the holes on the tray that you're going to be cooking them in. And you're going to I use a chopping board because I find it easier than rolling out straight onto the side and easier to clean up afterwards. You're going to put flour over your rolling pin and over your chopping board or your surface so that the pastry doesn't stick as you're rolling it out and cutting it. Start by using about half the amount of pastry you've made. You don't want to be rolling out your pastry too often. I roll mine out, I think, to about 2 or 3 millimeters, but I go by touch. So if you say that from each half of your pastry as you roll it, you should be able to get 6.5 mince pies. That should give you an idea of how thick you want to roll your pastry. I always say you could get 13 mince pies out of this, but I'm not going to grease another tray for one mince pie. So I get 12, and then I put the leftover pastry to the side, make another batch of mince pies and do the same. And then once I'm finished, however many batches I'm making, I bring together all those leftover bits of pastry and I make however many jam tarts for my husband, as he doesn't eat mince pies. Okay, and so don't rush your rolling out either. You'll do it too thin and you'll have to start over, and then you're rolling out your pastry more times than necessary. And as you roll it onto flour, it's drying out. As you're touching it, it's drying out. It's not going to be as nice. And use your rolling pin to turn your pastry over, and just keep rotating your pastry as you roll it. You want it to be evenly the same thickness throughout. Once you've made them a few times, you'll be able to feel just by touch around the edges how thick your pastry is. And you're going to start by making sure that your cutters have got like a coating of flour on the bottom, just so that the pastry doesn't stick to them either as you're cutting it out. There is a bit of dodgy video editing going on here because I didn't think you needed to see the same thing happening twice. But you want to try and get 6 bottoms out of your first roll out of each half of the pastry. And then I think you'll probably get 3, maybe 4 tops out of your second roll out, and then hopefully the rest out of the third, and you might have to do a fourth. Really, it's better though to try and, like, you want to get your cutters as close to each other as possible when you're cutting out, so that you're not wasting space where you could have got another cut out. See, 4 out of that top one, so I've only got to get another 2 out. And as you can see around the edges, it's more scraggly. The pastry isn't as nice as it was before, but you still need flour to stop it sticking. And then once you've done that, I like to do a quick bit of tidying up, so I clear that stuff that I don't need anymore out of the way. I have a tea towel that I use for this, just to bring all the flour out of the way. And you want it to be a clean tea towel so you can still use that flour for your fork in a minute. And then we're going to get the tray that it's all going to be going into. And what we're going to be doing with the trays, we're going to be taking the plate that has the mince pie bottoms and resting it on top of each hole and then gently pushing it in with our fingers. You want to take your time with this, because if you have to take it out and redo it, you're going to lose the shape that you've just cut the bottoms into. And then you're going to do that throughout the whole tray. Once you've done that, you're going to start adding your mincemeat. With your mincemeat, 1 teaspoon into each pie. It is enough, 1 heap teaspoon. However, I like my mince pies to be absolutely filled with mincemeat. I don't like there to be an air gap between the mincemeat and the lid of the pie. But that is how they come in the shops, and if that's how you like them, that's fine. When you do fill them as much as I do, you do get a little bit of bleeding of the mincemeat as it's baking, but I don't care. It's better than a half empty mince pie, and they still taste phenomenal. And so yeah, you want to try and not get any mincemeat round the tray, because it'll burn as it's cooking, or round the lip of the bottom of the pie, because it's going to affect how your lid sticks. And once those are done, we're going to get a fork, and we're just going to stick the fork into the flour on the side so that it doesn't stick to the pastry, and we're going to poke holes in the lids. This is so that the mince pies can breathe as they're baking. Not everybody does it, but it stops them from burning, and that way at least you know that all your pastry's cooked through without burning your pies. You don't want raw pastry in the middle of a pie or at the bottom of the pie. Yuck. And then once we've done this, we're going to get our egg white that had the little bit of yolk in it. We're going to whisk that up with some more cold water, and then we're just going to go around the outside edges of the lid. So you don't want to get it in the holes, because you'll fill the holes and then they won't do their job of allowing the pies to breathe. Once you've gone around the edges, you just want to pop that side downwards onto the open pie, and then go around the edge several times with your finger to make sure you've got your seal in place. Once you've done the whole tray like that, you're going to just use the rest of your egg wash to gently go over the tops of each one, again avoiding the holes so that you don't block them. Watch the oven as it cooks. I'd say give them 10 minutes and check them. I like to turn the tray around in this time to make sure that I'm getting an even bake, even though I've got a fan oven. And then once they're done, you take them out, and while they're still hot, it's important that you transfer each pie carefully onto a cooling rack. If you try to do this once the pies have gone cold, they won't necessarily lift out of the tray very well. They might stick, and that's heartbreaking after you've spent an hour making them. So yeah. And you won't see me do the egg wash on this video. Something went wrong. I think the battery died or something on my camera while I was filming it and I didn't notice. But yeah, just use your pastry brush with your finger as I'm doing. And just take your time. You know, baking is a moment for you. It's self-care at the end of the day and not something that needs to be rushed. Here they are finished, and you can see the egg wash has just left a slight golden sheen on the top. And I'm tipping them out, and that's them done. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like down below and check out my blog for the full recipe. Thank you.